What's going on, guys? I'm the Backseat GM, and today we're taking a look at all 32 first-round picks of the 2025 NFL Draft Class, and I'm giving an individual grade to each of these. Now, these are the complete honest grades. Every time I go to a website and I look at their grades, they just pretty much give an A grade to everybody. They're not afraid to actually voice their own opinions, so I'm going to be that voice of reason today. I'm going to give the realistic grade to each of these picks, and as you can probably tell, the webcam is a little bit worse than normal, or the the visual quality, and really that's just because I'm trying to get the videos out, and for these longer term or longer timed videos, my camera can't handle those for some reason. So I'll be doing this for now, but this will only be temporary, and we'll be getting back to the normal camera after that. And also, down in the description, I will have time spaces, so if for some reason on the video it doesn't have each individual team and pick, then you can go ahead and look in the description and skip around if you'd like. And yeah, with that in mind, let's get straight into it. Pick number 1, as we know, the Tennessee Titans started off the draft by picking Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. Now, really, the Titans didn't go wrong here. I gave this an A- grade. In my mind, the Titans needed a franchise quarterback. We know that. And with them doing this, I think that I don't know if this necessarily is the best move long term. I think trading down could have been. But the only thing we really heard when it came to trading down was that the Giants had offered pick number 3, a 2026 first round pick, and then some other picks, which could be day 3 picks, could be second, third round picks. Who really knows? But let's just assume out of the good picks, it's the 3rd overall pick and then a future first. That's not really that much for the number 1 pick compared to how much it'd be in normal years. So with that in mind, it's a less haul than it would be on an average year. And so even though Cam Ward does come with some risk, he has a ton of upside, and his film last year was really good. And in my mind, the Titans just have to go with Cam Ward, get the quarterback. So yeah, that's why it's a solid A-. At pick number 2 here for the Jaguars, they traded up. They gave up pick 35, 36, or not 35, pick 5, 36, and a 2026 first round pick to move up and select Travis Hunter, which I'm giving a B grade. Now, Travis Hunter, he's obviously great and flashy. He can play cornerback. He has potential to play wide receiver. He says he wants to do both. And honestly, the Jaguars are the perfect team to use him at both positions. At cornerback, you pair him with Tyson Campbell and Jarrian Jones, which is already a good cornerback duo. And then at wide receiver, you pair him up with Brian Thomas Jr., and you have some huge playmakers for Trevor Lawrence. Travis Hunter obviously was the right pick here. That being said, they had to give up a lot to move up for him. And if I was the Jaguars GM, I personally probably wouldn't have done that. I definitely would have been interested in trading up, but not for that price tag. So while I think it's a solid move, and it really helped because they did end up getting 2 2026 third round picks later in the draft via trade with the Lions. So they did get some of that future draft capital back. It still wasn't, it's still not a first round pick. And so for that, I'm giving the Travis Hunter grade a solid B. At pick number 3, the Giants drafted edge rusher Abdul Carter, which I gave again an A-. I do really like Abdul Carter. If I had this draft pick and I didn't trade back, I would have also drafted Abdul Carter here. Kayvon Thibodeau hasn't been great. He's been injured. He's kind of more talkative off the field than he is playing on the field. So I think this was the right pick. It was weird to me that they picked up Kayvon Thibodeau's 5th year directly as they drafted Abdul Carter. I don't know exactly what they have long term as their plan there. But that being said, you put him next to Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, and yeah, he's going to do the job. In most classes, I wouldn't pick Abdul Carter top 3, but in this class that has a lot of depth but isn't super talented at the very, very top, I have no issue with the Giants picking Abdul Carter. At number 4, the Patriots took Will Campbell, the offensive lineman from LSU, and I gave this a C+. Now, I am a bit lower on Will Campbell than consensus, especially at left tackle. I think you put him at guard, he can be really solid, but his 2024 film showed him getting beat a ton when he was playing tackle. These edge defenders were just too much for him at times. And again, if they push him inside, maybe this goes back up to a B- or B grade, because I do think he could be an elite guard. Would it be my pick? Probably not. I think if I stuck at 4, Armand Membel from Missouri would have been my pick, just to slide him at right tackle, put Mike Onwenu, or however you say his last name, put him back at guard where he was really good early in his career, and you just kind of build that for Drake May. But they still are protecting their QB. They get a guy who could be a Pro Bowler in the interior, and I'm not going to give that anything lower than a C+. At number 5, the Browns drafted Mason Graham, which I gave an A. Mason Graham, he does kind of concern me. I think he could be such an elite player. His 2023 film was so good, and his 2024 film was obviously very good as well. But it did concern me at times. I just saw a lot of times where he'd get kind of pushed down, like he'd fall off balance a ton, whether it was rushing the passer or trying to stop the run. But I think you put him next to Myles Garrett, and you're just going to see some great things happen. And then along with that already being a solid pick, it fills a need of defensive tackle for the Browns. And they gained a 2026 first and pick 36 along with Mason Graham because of that Travis Hunter trade. So for all those reasons, I think the Browns crushed this overall the first round. So I'm giving this an A. Pick number 6 for the Raiders, Ashton Jeanty. I'm giving a B-. I love Ashton Jeanty, and I think if you disregard position, he's the best player available. But in my mind, the Raiders, they're just not ready to compete. They have a decent roster, all things considered, but they're definitely not ready to compete, especially in that really good division with the Chiefs, Chargers, and Broncos. And along with that, running backs just aren't that valuable. You can get an elite running back in the league for $10 million a year. Maybe 12 with the inflated, cap space. But you are paying double that just to get a barely startable tackle. So to draft Ashton Jeanty at 6, it would make more sense if it was someone like the Bears or the Cowboys. But for the Raiders, I just don't love it quite as much, which is why it got a B- despite my love for Ashton Jeanty. And speaking of Armand Membel earlier, the Jets took him here at number 7, and I gave that an A grade. He was my number 4 player on my big board. He was the number 1 offensive lineman on my big board out of interior and tackles. And in my mind, the Jets were just a right tackle away from creating an elite offensive line. They just drafted Fashanu last year at left tackle. They've got John Simpson. They've got Joe Tippmann, Elijah Vera Tucker, and then you add Armand Membel, who's already used to playing right tackle. Elite offensive line. Honestly, if Justin Fields cannot succeed with that offensive line, Garrett Wilson, then he's an official bust, because that is the perfect offense for any quarterback. And I love that pick here for the Jets. At number 8, we saw the Panthers select Tedoroy McMillan, or T-Mac, wide receiver out of U of A, and I gave this a C grade. Now, some of the hate that McMillan has been getting is ridiculous. Some of the times he's getting projected as a 3rd round pick in some of these grades from some people on X. But then you also see the flip side, and you see people like PFF who have just consistently had him as their number 3 player in the entire class. That's ridiculous. I like T-Mac. He is not fast enough, and he cannot separate well enough to be the number 3 pick in the class. That being said, he's my wide receiver 2. I have a late 1st round grade or early 2nd round grade. He's kind of right in between that. And despite his separation question marks and his speed question marks, I do think that he could be a really good slant receiver, and then obviously We know how good he is at, contested catches and making spectacular one-handed catches and just being kind of that deep threat option for Bryce Young. And of course, Bryce Young needs weapons. Maybe they could have waited. Maybe they could have drafted a receiver. But because they because they prioritized Bryce Young, and that's what they need to do, I am still giving this a C. At pick number 9, we had the Saints drafting Kelvin Banks Jr. Again, Kelvin Banks is another guy that just, the hate is insane. Like, he's produced multiple years of solid film. Just because it wasn't maybe as top 5 draft pick looking as people were expecting doesn't mean he's a 3rd round type of guy like some of these guys are saying. And I think 9 is actually a very solid spot for him. He went earlier than I think pretty much everyone was guessing he would. But the Saints need offensive line terribly bad. Ryan just retired from the right tackle spot. Penning, his 5th year, didn't get picked up. They are struggling. They have like Cesar Ruiz, somebody else I can't remember, and that's basically it. So Kelvin Banks, put him at left tackle and just try to build that up. Saints are in a really weird spot, and getting a franchise left tackle is really solid. So I'm giving this a B+. At pick 10, the Chicago Bears selected Colston Loveland, tight end, and I gave this a D grade. Now, don't hate me, Chicago fans, but I've just got to be honest here, Now, I am lower on Colston Loveland for the record, and that obviously puts some effect into it. Some of these people have Colston Loveland number 5, number 7 on their big board, versus I'm more of a late first, early second with this guy as well. He was surprisingly taken here before Warren. I'm a little higher on Warren than I am Colston Loveland. I still am not huge on Tyler Warren, but I am a little bit surprised that they went in the direction of Loveland, especially when they have Cole Kmet already. I think they could have done some more stuff on defense, maybe gone offensive line, maybe trade down. And again, their offensive line's pretty solid now, but you can always make improvements. So realistically, I don't like this pick. I think the one redeeming thing that they could do is run a 2 tight end set, which I know they do decently often. But if you do it where you have Kmet on one side and you have Loveland on one side, it could really be good for the offense and for the running backs. But that being said, Loveland's not even really an elite blocker. He's more of a thin frame, vertical threat receiver who just has solid hands and can have some solid route running. So I don't really see the fit too well, but I'm sure the Bears will use him, and we'll see what happens with Cole Kmet. With the 11th pick in the draft, the 49ers selected Mykel Williams, edge rusher. I gave this a C-. Mykel Williams is a guy, he's got a lot of run-stopping potential and just a lot of potential overall, but he's just not quite there yet. He's another guy I'm lower on because he doesn't use pass rush moves often enough, and he's just not there on film. I know his 2023 film before his injury was a little bit more redeeming, but even then, it didn't show top 15 draft pick level, talent there. But he's a Georgia player. He's a run-stopping edge rusher, and those often develop into solid pass rushers. He's got really good power. He fits a need for the 49ers. Put him across Nick Bosa, and especially put him on that 49ers staff. Anything is possible. The sky are the limits when you're put on that staff. But right now, I just don't think his film's there. At pick 12, the Cowboys selected guard Tyler Booker. I gave this a C- as well. The Cowboys need to look O-line. I know a lot of people were looking defense for them. I do not mind them picking offensive line here at all. And Tyler Booker has potential to be an elite pass blocker. But he is a guy that has limited athleticism, so the Cowboys have to use a man running scheme, and they have to make sure that's what their offense is running around if they're having Tyler Booker, as one of the front men for them. I don't necessarily think he's a top 12 player in this class. I had an early second round grade on Booker, and I think there are other offensive linemen out there that they could have taken or they could have traded down for. So that's why I'm kind of giving it a C-. I like Tyler Booker, and I like the need or the fit for what they need. I just think it's a little bit early. At pick 13, we have the Dolphins selecting Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle, and I gave this an A-. I thought the Dolphins could have traded down here, and maybe they could have traded down to get Kenneth Grant. Who knows, really? But I understand not wanting to take the risk. And they needed interior defensive line desperately. So you get a great athlete who is just massive. He could plug up the holes next to Zach Sealer, and obviously help set the edge rushers more like Bradley Chubb, Phillips, Chop Robinson, those guys. And he's a guy who's really good as a run stopper and a pass rusher. He shows a lot of potential on both of those ends. And I was one of the few people who had Kenneth Grant in my top 10 on my big board. So I know most people think it's a little bit early for him, but based on my big board, it's actually a kind of a steal, if I'm being honest. I do think that he could be better than Mason Graham long term. Now, I did have Mason Graham higher on my big board, but with some of the issues that Graham has and some of the plus that Kenneth Grant could build into, I could see down the road where Kenneth Grant's better. So for the Dolphins, I love this. And at pick 14, the Colts selected tight end Tyler Warren, and now the guy finally comes off the board. And I'm giving this a B+. Some of the hype with Warren went insane. I saw some people putting him number 3 on their big board, number 5 on their big board. I just don't get it that much. I think he's a really good tight end. I think he can be an elite NFL player. But he's also a guy with shorter arms, which isn't great for contested catch situations. And he's a guy whose stamina isn't great. Now, he was used a ton at Penn State. He was their number 1 guy. So I understand running out of stamina, especially when you're a guy that big. But it did show up sometimes on film in that fourth quarter when he just wasn't the same sometimes. But again, he's a weapon all over the field. He's great with the ball in his hands despite being a tight end. And he's a really solid blocker. So he's probably, between him and Loveland, I think he's the better blocking tight end. So you get him, you have him block for Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, and it could just do wonders for the offense. So you feel a need. You don't have overdraft the tight end to do so. And I just think it kind of fits with their offense a lot. So I still love this pick for the Colts. At pick 15, the Falcons selected Jalen Walker, and I'm giving this a C-. Jalen Walker was a guy I've seen also in top 5 in many big boards. I think ESPN actually had him number 4 overall on their big board, if I remember correctly. And I know Bucky Brooks, I'm pretty sure he had him at number 5 on his big board. I didn't see it, especially when these guys are pretty much listing him as an edge rusher. I think if he plays off-ball linebacker for the Falcons like he could, because the Falcons drafted James Pierce Jr., which we'll talk about later, I think if they put Walker as linebacker in a 4-3, actually, don't know what their defense is, but I know it's been 4-3. So if it's still 4-3, you put him as outside linebacker there. Let him be that Edgar and Cooper kind of role where he's blitzing the quarterback a lot. And maybe he plays off the edge a little bit, but not primarily. And I think it could work because I know he could be like a high character guy who you could just develop into that really solid all around player. But I still had a 2nd round grade on this guy. And I think if he plays full-time edge, I would have a 3rd round grade on this guy. So at 15, it's just a little bit too rich. And at 16 for the Cardinals, they selected Walter Nolan, which I gave a C+. It definitely fills a defensive need at the minimum. And honestly, that defense looks decent on paper. Walter Nolan was obviously a 5-star recruit. He shows a ton of promise in the pass rushing, and he was actually improving against the run, even though it's not perfect. So again, I do have some run stopping concerns with him. He's not a grossly bad run stopper, but it's just not great. And I've been burned way too many time from guys like Jerry Tillery and guys like that on Javon Kinlaw, guys who are just really good pass rushers, but not great against the run. And I think Walter Nolan is ahead of those two guys when it comes to stopping the run, but I don't think it's that crazy good. And so I do have some concerns there. I think it's a little bit of a reach there for the Cardinals. But again, it's a need. They need some guys on defense. Not going to hate on it too much. At pick 17, the Bengals selected Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher, the pure potential edge rusher, and I'm giving this a C+. I think the Bengals, since they are a championship contending team, if they can build that defense, especially with Joe Burrow and company, I would have liked to have seen a guy who's more ready right now. But obviously, Shamar Stewart is that high risk, high reward guy. He filled a need for the team, especially if they lose Trey Hendrickson. Then edge rusher is a massive need. Bengals are one of those teams that just have a lot of players on both sides. They just need trenches. And so while I think there were better options there, I don't hate the pick. I think if Shamar Stewart develops, the sky's the limit for him. So for the Bengals, I'm giving that a C+. At pick 18, the Seahawks selected Gray Zabel, and I'm giving this a D+. I know the Seahawks needed a guard, and he's a guy who could fill in at guard, or he can be put at tackle and somebody else can be at guard. I know he had a high PFF grade. I know he has potential to be versatile. He's a trenches player, which is what the Seahawks need. But realistically, I had an early third round grade on him, and I think there's so many good offensive linemen available that they could have done instead. Guys like Josh Simmons, Josh Connerly. I even had Ariante Ursary. I even had him above Gray Zabel. So maybe I'm wrong about him. Maybe he's just going to be really good. But based on my film, I have to give this a D+. At pick 19, we saw the Buccaneers take Emeka Egbuka in one of the really surprising picks of the first round, which I gave a C+. Egbuka is my wide receiver 1. Most people have him about wide receiver 2, 3, or 4. But he is my wide receiver 1. I love this guy. But I don't understand it for the Buccaneers. They obviously have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and then they have McMillan, the really good wide receiver from Washington. So unless Chris Godwin is just going to be injured and there's something we don't fully know about that, or if they're planning to move on from one of these guys, or maybe they're just playing the long game, I don't know what it is. I think they have more pressing needs than just another wide receiver, so that's why I gave it a C+. But I don't mind Egbuka at pick 19 at all. I think he's a really good player, so it's kind of a wait to see what the Buccaneers do at the wide receiver spot. But for now, I'm giving it a C+. At pick 20, we saw the Broncos take cornerback Jahdae Barron. In my opinion, this was arguably the best available pick. I would have said Will Johnson, but he fell to the middle of the second round, so I don't even know how bad that knee injury is. But outside of Will Johnson, I would have taken Jahdae Barron. I think he's an elite player. He does have some questions with his length. He has really poor length, like arm length and stuff, which is not great. And you kind of question where his role is in the NFL. He's probably more of that slot cornerback, which isn't quite as valuable as an outside cornerback or just a pure safety. But that being said, even if he stays as a slot guy, he'd be a massive guy to put next to Patrick Surtain. And again, he has versatility. You could put him at safety, put him at cornerback. And I think he's probably a top 15 player in this class. So no complaints there. I think the Broncos defense looks amazing next year, and I'm giving this an A. At pick 21, we saw the Steelers take Derek Harmon, which I gave a C. It fills a need, puts him next to Keanu Benton and Cameron Hayward. And of course, Hayward is getting close to the retirement age, so Derek Harmon could replace him once he does retire or they move on from him, whichever's first. I don't know. I just don't see it fully with Derek Harmon. I'm an Oregon fan, but honestly, he was the guy I was a little bit lower on. He is an elite pass rusher for sure. I think he might have had the most pressures out of any defensive tackle in the class, if I stand corrected. I might be wrong about that, but it was some giant number. He was really good at pressuring the quarterback. But similar to Walter Nolan, he's not a great run stopper. He might even be a worse run stopper than Walter Nolan. And he has serious tackling issues. Like, this guy missed so many tackles. So I had a late second round grade on him. So I think it was an overdraft. But that being said, you put him next to Herbig, TJ Watt, Hayward, and Benton. that, his ability to rush the passer alone, he could be just a pressure machine for the Steelers. And even though he's kind of lax in that run stopping department, he could still have a prominent role on that defense, even if he's not the perfect, well-rounded player. At pick 22, the Chargers took Omarion Hampton, which I gave a C-. There are a lot of things I like about it. It takes pressure off Herbert more. He's a 3-down back. He has pass blocking upside for Herbert. But he's also just a running back, and he is my RB3 at that. So, he was taken later than a lot of people were projecting him. Some people were going 10 to the Bears, 12 to the Cowboys, stuff like that. So, 22 is not terrible value, but I wouldn't have drafted him this high personally, and I think they could have had more pressing needs to fill earlier than, just another running back. So, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. At pick 23, the Packers took Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas, and I gave that a B-. The Packers have a lot of solid wide receivers already, so was wide receiver the most pressing need? Probably not. Probably edge or cornerback, but all of those wide receivers they have are just solid. Like Reed and Christian Watson and, Dobbs, Vicks, all these, or Vicks or Wicks, however you say it, from Virginia. All of these guys are very solid, but none of them have really shown to be elite yet. So it's either one of two things. Either Matthew Golden becomes that elite guy. He has a lot of similarities to Stephon Diggs. So even though his production in college wasn't elite, maybe he kind of develops into that, and then it's a good pick for the Packers. But if Matthew Golden is just a solid wide receiver, then he's just another body in that receiver room of solid wide receivers, and they didn't fill a pressing need, and they didn't really improve that much. So it'll all depend on Matthew Golden's development. So for that reason, I'm giving it a B-. At pick 24, we saw the Vikings take offensive guard Donovan Jackson, and I gave this a B. Now, offensive line definitely wasn't the biggest need for the Vikings. I would have liked to see them potentially go in the secondary, look at either safety or cornerback, especially when you've got Malachi Starks, Nick Emenwari, Siobhan Revel Jr., Trey Amos, Will Johnson, you name it. There's a lot of DBs that were available, pretty much all of them for the most part. So with that in mind, I would have liked to see one of those guys. However, Donovan Jackson completes the offensive line. He fills in that left guard spot. It's another guy to guard for J.J. McCarthy. And honestly, with Donovan Jackson, if he's just solid at best, that's now probably the best offensive line in the league. On paper, that offensive line is scary good. And now J.J. McCarthy has no excuses. He's going to be a first-year guy and he's young. So I guess that's his semi-excuse. But he has the weapons. He has the perfect offensive line. So even though I wouldn't have taken Donovan Jackson here, I would have taken, secondary guy like I said, I still like the pick and I'm giving it a B. At pick 25, the Giants traded up for Jackson Dart, and I'm giving this a B. Now, Jackson Dart does scare me a bit, because sometimes, man, his film was just so elite, and it was hard to find any mistakes for when I was looking at my top 5 quarterback video. I went back and watched film. It took a while to find some inaccurate Jackson Dart passes, but it really does depend on the game, because sometimes you turn on another game, and he'll just be wildly inconsistent. He's pretty much a play-action quarterback, or he was often a play-action quarterback, I should say. And that's a little more difficult to transition a quarterback to the NFL with. But that being said, pick 25, I don't think it's a crazy overdraft. And to move up to 25, they only gave up pick 34, 99, and a 2026 third-round pick, which isn't that much to move up to get a quarterback. So they didn't overpay to move up. And what they also did is they were able to draft him in the first round, meaning that if Jackson Dart becomes good or becomes solid but not elite, they have that 5th-year option on him now to figure out what they want to do with it. So in my mind, it's a low-risk move to get your potential franchise quarterback, and so got to give that a B. At pick 26, the Falcons took James Pierce Jr., which I'm giving a B-. Very good value for James Pierce Jr. Very, very big need for the Falcons. That being said, there's a lot of edge rushers in this draft class. And sure, maybe James Pierce ends up being the best one out of all the ones available. He very well could be. He had very good film. But they traded a future first round pick and a second round pick this year just to get him, when there's a lot of guys they could have waited for, like Mike Green, Nick Scorton, etc. So I like the pick a lot. I like the value a lot. The trade up for James Pierce Jr. didn't make too much sense to me. At pick 27, we have the Ravens selecting Malachi Starks, and this is my first A+ grade of the class. Now, his 2024 film wasn't perfect. He did allow some catches in man-to-man, but it was still very solid. And this was a guy who produced multiple years of good film. He was a 3-year starter at Georgia. He has really good zone coverage, ball skills, and run-stopping skills. And you put that next to Kyle Hamilton, that's arguably, if not, unless you count like the Falcons now or something like that, unless I'm missing a team maybe, that's probably the best safety duo in the league, like legitimately. And he's a guy who's a top 15 player on my board, so getting him at 27 is just great value. Fills a need, great value, great player, instant impact for a championship level team. That equals an A+. At pick 28, the Lions selected Tyleik Williams, which I gave a C grade. Now, Tyleik Williams, very solid run stopper. I think he's going to be a great run stopper for them, but the pick really doesn't make much sense to me. He's limited as a pass rusher, which can, of course, develop. But just need-wise, I don't think interior defensive lineman was the pick here. Tyleik Williams was the guy I had a second-round grade on. So it was a little bit of an overdraft to me. Not crazy, but a little bit. But really, the guys they have right now, you have Ali McNeil, I'm never going to say this guy's name right, but it's Onwuzurike, the guy from Washington, and then DJ Reader. And those are 3 really solid guys. So obviously they've had some injury issues, and DJ Reader's getting up there in age. So maybe Tyleik Williams is a guy who can be a rotation guy for a year and then become a full-time starter. But I just think that he's a solid player who isn't the biggest need. So for that reason, I have to give it a C. At pick 29, the Commanders got Josh Connerly Jr., and I'm giving this an A. Now, as an Oregon fan, I gave my hate to Derek Harmon, but I'm giving my love to Josh Connerly Jr., and watch it end up being the opposite in the NFL. But we'll see. I don't think Josh Connerly is perfect, that being said, but he is a top 20 player on my big board, and I think he's a really solid pass protector. And I think some of the early second-round grades from him are a little bit low on him. I really like this guy's film. And now you put him next to Laramie Tunsil and Sam Cosmi, and you have just great pass protectors for Jane Daniels. And sure, he can continue to gain strength, continue to gain run blocking skills, and if he does that, he is a great pick here. At pick 30, the Bills took cornerback Maxwell Hairston, and I gave this a D. Don't hate me, Bills fans. I'm a Dolphins fan, but that's not why I gave you guys a D overall grade here. Maxwell Hairston is a guy to me who's just a high potential guy. He's got great speed, he's got some ball skills, and he's solid in zone coverage. So he could be a very solid player in the NFL. It just wouldn't be my pick. I think with, again, Will Johnson, Siobhan Revel Jr., Trey Amos, Benjamin Morrison, I would have taken all of those guys. Even Benjamin Morrison with his injury question marks. I would have taken all those guys ahead of Maxwell Hairston. And so he fills the need for the Bills. Sure, that is true. It just wouldn't be my pick, and I had a 3rd-round grade on Maxwell Hairston. At pick 31, the Eagles selected linebacker Jihad Campbell, and this is my second A+ grade. They did have to give up a 5th-round pick to move up only one spot. But for Jihad Campbell, a guy who was in my top 10 on my big board for this class, I think it's perfect. I mean, Howie Roseman did it again. He does it every year, and these teams are idiots, and they let great players fall to him, and he just moves up a little bit without having to give up too much. Same with Jalen Carter, and I think we'll see the exact same thing with Jihad Campbell in the NFL. I love this dude, man. I think he fills a need for them too. I think Nakobe Dean's been a solid linebacker too for them, but he's injury prone. You never know when he's going to actually be out there. So you put Jihad Campbell next to Zach Bond, man, that defense is so good. And last but not least, the Chiefs drafted Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, out of Ohio State, and I gave this an A. And as you can tell, my voice is starting to go away, so it's a pretty good thing this is the last pick. But Josh Simmons, man, he did have that, I believe it was a knee injury, which is definitely concerning. It took him out for the 2024 season after only a few games. But Josh Simmons is one of those guys where even though he wasn't as elite to me on film as some other people seem to believe, I still really liked his film. And he's a guy who's insanely athletic. Like, this guy might be the most athletic tackle I have ever scouted. Legitimately. Like, his speed and his ability to just run out and get there, man, it is so impressive. So I think you put him at tackle, you put him at guard, it doesn't matter. It fills a massive need for the Chiefs. And overall, despite his knee injury, I love Josh Simmons. And I love him here with the need for the Chiefs. And I'm giving this an A grade. And with my voice being gone, that is going to conclude my my grades for the top 32 picks in the NFL draft. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Peace.